Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you guys are having a good day. A little bit of a close-up on my face there. Welcome back, folks. Today we are not over at Founder's Forge. In fact, we are 5,000 blocks away at my mob spawner that I built near the ski resort project. And the reason for that is because this is now my best source of gunpowder. Even though we did a little bit of a modification to the creeper farm just to make sure it could still work with wither roses, I thought this farm was probably still the most efficient shot I had at getting gunpowder. It still generates some spiders here and there, but a lot of the time it will spawn creepers now that I've replaced all of the roofs here with trapdoors and made sure that only creepers and spiders can spawn in there, apart from a section over there that I missed. I only have like 12 trapdoors left, so I don't think I could cover it even if I did. Just needed to go and get more wood, I guess. But yeah, we are getting a little bit of gunpowder. As you can see from my inventory, I've gotten a few stacks of it now, probably enough to make 2 stacks of TNT. And TNT is, of course, the reason I am farming gunpowder in the first place. And it all has to do with the 1.16 update and Ancient Debris. Ancient Debris is obviously a lot of people's focus right now. It's the goal for a lot of people. And in my case, even though I have a full set of netherite stuff, at this point, I still want to be collecting Ancient Debris in order to make myself a netherite beacon, or just play around with more netherite blocks for building. I think Ancient Debris is also going to have a lot of interesting functionality, considering it is a blast-proof block that is also pushable, so we could end up using that to great advantage in tree farms and stuff like that. How did I get back onto that, by the way? That was like a really weird hitbox maneuver there. I'm not quite sure what happened. Anyway, what I want to do is make a more efficient version of this farm, because this farm, as you can see, isn't spawning a huge amount of stuff at a time. It gets a few big drops occasionally, but we could definitely do more to improve the amount of spawns we get. And one way in which we could do that is to basically multiply this design outwards, so instead of just one set of spawning platforms, we end up with about 4 or 5, because the mob cap per player, the amount of mobs that will generate if you have an area where hostile mobs can spawn, is I think somewhere around the 70 to 90 range. I forget what the number is exactly without looking it up on the Minecraft wiki, but it is a larger number than you will get in an average spawn cycle on these platforms. And that, I think, is partly due to the fact that the game makes multiple spawning attempts, checks for the amount of mobs that are already in a chunk-wide area, and also has less time to spawn stuff, considering these platforms are flushing out with water every few seconds. So what I'm thinking we should do is we should multiply the spawning pads of these so we get even more, and make them all into these creeper spawning pads so that we just get string and gunpowder out of the farm, plus, I guess, occasional skeleton drops for when a spider jockey spawns in here. But the update has more to give than that, and we can actually improve the killing mechanism, which, let's face it, if we were to multiply this farm outwards, we would need an extraordinary amount of hoppers with our current system. But with a new system that I think we are going to take advantage of now that the update has come into effect, we are going to be getting a lot more drops, a lot faster, with a lot fewer hoppers. And the secret to that is Soul Fire. Soul Fire is a brand new phenomenon that can be found occurring naturally in soul sand valleys in the Nether, although the effect is not exclusive to this biome. In fact, any material made of soul anything, whether it is soul sand or soul soil, will burn with a bright blue flame now. And that includes player-placed flames, but it also includes flames set by things like ghast fireballs and bed explosions. When a player steps into Soul Fire, you still get set on fire with one of these, yellow, orange, red kind of flames. It doesn't burn blue on the player itself, but you'll notice that Soul Fire actually deals a little bit more damage when you are standing in the block itself. It is more dangerous to the player than regular fire is. Still not as dangerous as lava, of course, but otherwise pretty darn dangerous. And the cool thing about this is that it applies to mobs as well. Not only that, but with a little bit of soul soil gathered, we can start to use Soul Fire for a couple of different things. We covered this briefly in our episode about piglins because it was worth noting that Soul Fire actually drives piglins away, but there are a couple of other things we can use it for, some of which are simply aesthetic purposes. Let's make a bunch of soul torches here using the crafting recipe, of 1 block of soul soil, 1 stick, and 1 coal. Basically the torch crafting recipe, but with a soul soil block underneath it. Can only be made in a 3x3 crafting table grid. So let's grab a bunch of those. We get 4 torches each, meaning that we have a couple of stacks here to work with, or stack and a half, more or less. And by grabbing some iron nuggets, of course, we can now turn these into soul lanterns, which will allow us to hang these things up. And I've already got one of those here in the storage unit building. Now I'm going to head out here and try and find a cave I have not yet explored, because one of the major differences between soul fire and regular fire is a difference in light level, and we can demonstrate that if I can find a dark enough space. This seems like it will do. Now at this point we're all pretty familiar with the light level provided by regular torches. If I place a torch in this cave here, stand in it and open the F3 debug information, you will see that this is giving off a light level of 14 blocks. Basically 14 blocks in a straight line in that direction will be provided light, with the number diminishing by 1 each time until you get far enough away that you're not receiving any light from this torch at all. But the light here is pretty evident, and it's nice and easy to navigate if you're using it in caves. Now if we place a soul torch, the effect is slightly different. You will notice that there is a little bit of a dimmer light given off by these things. If I compare it to a torch here, for example, you'll notice that when I place that down, the environment does get noticeably brighter. And that indicates this soul torch has a different light level. If I press F3 once again, you'll see that we have a light level of 10 instead of the 14 provided by a regular torch. So soul torches already give off a light level that is 4 light levels lower than a standard torch. This has a couple of really interesting applications. One of which is that where a normal torch might melt the snow layers around it, because snow melts in a light level of 11 or higher, soul torches will not. They will of course replace the snow layer that you place them on, but of course outside of that you will not see the snow starting to melt, whereas over here this torch has already started to melt some of the snow layers immediately around it, the ones it is providing light to. This soul torch, on the other hand, preserves the snow around it, and so I'm thinking about maybe taking a bunch of these back to my mountain project, and to a certain extent we could mob-proof that area without worrying about any of the snow melting. Not to mention that the soul fire does burn with a really nice blue light that I personally think would look really, really nice over in the snow biome, kind of give that cold atmosphere to everything. The light itself is not a different color because Minecraft's lighting engine only really provides a general purpose white light to everything, so it's not going to cast a blue light up around the walls, but it is going to provide a certain amount of atmosphere. Let's head down into another test cave for test number 2. Do soul lanterns provide a similar light level? I can basically just tell from the surroundings that they do, but if we stand on the soul lantern, you'll see that this also gives off a block light of 10 when you're standing directly on it. So soul lanterns give off exactly the same light level as soul torches, meaning that they can also be used in areas where you don't feel like torches are really the best thing. But there is a third way we can use these new soul fire mechanics to craft something pretty special, and that is a soul campfire. Making these is pretty much the same as the standard campfire recipe, except instead of using coal, we instead put some soul soil there. You don't need the soul torches for that, you just need some soul soil, 3 logs, and 3 sticks arranged like so. And aesthetically speaking, aside from the blue flame, soul campfires do basically the same thing a regular campfire will do. They will emit smoke particles. If you place a hay bale underneath them, they will emit a higher train of smoke particles because the particles won't disperse until a little bit higher up. You need Silk Touch to pick them up. If you pick them up without Silk Touch, then you'll end up needing to reassemble it from its component parts. They can be extinguished by right-clicking with a shovel, and if you relight them, they do burn blue again. So this block is saved as a Soul Fire Campfire. It's not like if you extinguish it and then you light it again, it becomes a regular campfire. This is a Soul Fire Campfire. But the most important thing for our mob farming operation is that Soul Fire once again does double the amount of damage that regular fire does, and that extends to campfires as well. So potentially, we can use this thing to kill mobs basically twice as fast as regular campfires would. And campfires, much like magma blocks, have been used in mob farms over the last little while so that they can provide a passive way of damaging mobs and killing them nice and quickly. And that is where the redesigned mob farm comes in, because if we use a 3x3 area of these above some hoppers, we can definitely cut down on the amount of hoppers we're using to collect mob drops, and hopefully the mobs will end up dying pretty fast if they're just channeled into these campfires using water streams. So I reckon we're going to pick a brand new place in the world to set up up a mob farm, because even though we have the balloon mob farm over here, I think we need something a little bit more efficient and a few more platforms in there. And we're not going to do that all the way over at the ski resort again, because it's a long way to travel when I just want a bunch of gunpowder that I can AFK for. So I'm going to pick a low-lying area around here, somewhere that's got a nice flat area with few enough mountains around that I'm not going to spawn stuff if I AFK somewhere up in the sky, and we're going to build ourselves a new mob farm. Hey folks, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the time lapse, and looking at this up in the sky, it really does look kind of majestic at this point. And I'm in the process of wiring up each of these platforms so that they can alternate dispensing water, and I've decided I'm going to keep these all as regular mob spawning platforms instead of dedicating them entirely to creeper spawning, because I would like to have an extra supply of bone meal as well, which means we're probably going to keep these platforms open without the trapdoors. Also means a little bit less work putting all of those trapdoors in. And if we want to, we could specialize a couple of these so they are more likely to spawn the creepers and spiders, and then leave a couple of them more open, where you could, balance out the yield of each of the different items that way. But first of all, I think I would like to make this a general mob farm. We can always trade off the rotten flesh and everything else to my clerics and so forth. So the next steps are already underway. I have set up several platforms of hoppers underneath here. That's a 3x3 of hoppers with a 3x3 of soul campfires on top of it, and that is going to deliver twice the amount of damage to a mob that a regular campfire or a magma block would, so it should be a pretty efficient, swift killing mechanism, and that will allow the mobs to respawn on the platforms much more quickly once the other mobs are cleared out of the mob cap. As you can see from each of these, I've also given this a couple of blocks worth of height in here so that the mobs can fall down, because I've noticed in similar mechanisms, if the farm is especially productive, which hopefully each of these spawning pads should be, once the mobs get towards the center there, if they hang around in the corners, they can potentially block other mobs from falling in. And we basically want to make sure the mobs go in as quickly as possible, so I've made sure that their hitboxes won't interfere with more mobs falling in there thanks to the water. We may occasionally get spiders crawling out of there, but at that point they don't really have anywhere to go. They'll just fall back in eventually and die in the campfires anyway. And the next stage is setting up each of these platforms with dispensers and observers. And the orientation of those is actually quite important, so I'm going to run through that with you on this next set of platforms. First of all, I'm going to put the dispensers in my offhand just for this first platform here, because I want to be able to break and replace the center block very quickly, like so, just to make sure that no water falls through and ends up affecting the campfires below. We do not want those flames to be doused, and it seems like they are still blazing merrily away in there. And we don't want to fall in there right now, because that could be a pretty swift death if I'm not too careful. But then back on the platform above the dispenser in the middle, I need to place an observer facing downwards, like so. And every time the activity of the dispenser above it is detected by this observer, it will power this air block here, which does actually power the dispenser. Another quasi-connectivity thing for you here, but it's actually very, very useful for this farm in particular. We're going to put a bucket in there so that the dispenser can retract the water, and we just need to do that on every platform going upwards, which is why having towers of scaffolding here is going to come in very, very useful. It's also worth noting the rest of this area around here is a bottom half slab, making sure that nothing will be able to spawn on there, and this cross brace that I've kept in the center here is also slabbed off. We will have the rest of this covered with hoppers, which may also themselves end up being covered up by slabs or something so that no items fall in from above if we break the scaffolding here or something like that. Just want to make sure that all of this stuff is spawn proof so that the only spawnable spaces remain inside the farm itself. And I think we are going to have these platforms alternating, because that should hopefully result in more frequent mob spawns, especially if we have 4 sets of platforms like this. Having one platform be full of water, one platform not, means that we will always have stuff spawning even when the other platforms are flushing out. And I've already done that with a single set of platforms that we've got over by the ski area, but I think this is going to be a little bit more productive, and therefore it's essential that we make sure some of the platforms can do their thing while the other platforms are flushing out. And with that last dispenser and observer in place, the observer is facing up into this block that I've left up here at the top of the platforms, and this is looking pretty good so far. I do need to make sure that I got the platforms oriented the way I want them, with water on some of them and not on others, but then it's just a matter of putting a giant roof on this entire thing and then wiring up each of these observers so they all trigger in unison. They don't have to do it that way, but I feel like it's kind of neat doing it that way, and we can switch all of the farm on and off at once if we don't want to use it. So the task that is left to me at this point is to finish off these last 2 spawning platforms and potentially build a giant roof over this thing as well, because we want to make sure it is dark inside the farm even during the day so that we can maximize the potential for mobs to spawn here. The other thing we're going to need here is one heck of a sorting system, because when this thing is up and running, I don't want to be sorting through chests of miscellaneous stuff, picking out the rotten flesh from the gunpowder, from the string, from the everything else. I want to make sure everything is coming into slices of an automatic sorting system. Therefore, every time I come here and I want to get gunpowder, I just have to go to one set of chests and all the gunpowder will be there for me. So I think underneath one of these, probably this one, kind of facing outwards from the farm, I think we're going to set up an automatic sorting system here. I've given myself a little bit of headroom for that, and all of the hoppers from each of these areas can just all flow into the same system, and hopefully that's going to work without too much redstone spaghetti. We could have these hoppers output to a set of dropper clocks and have the entire thing spat into water streams for slightly faster transmission, but I honestly think this system is going to be enough, and if it's not, we can always adjust it later so that it is. So I think, yeah, the next step is going to be setting up this sorting system around here. We'll channel all of the hoppers into that, and I'm going to build that off camera because, to be honest, I think I've shown these sorting systems on camera enough. You guys know the drill by now. Let's just get this thing done. Well, I said I wasn't going to do it, and then I went ahead and did it. We have a bunch of water streams now carrying items from dropper clocks all around the outside here. They're actually dispenser clocks, actually, and there's a reason for that, because there is one item that we're going to get from these mob farms which I genuinely do not want any more of in my life, and that is arrows from skeletons. So the dispensers are actually going to fire those arrows every time, and I could replace them with droppers if that becomes a problem. I have a feeling that maybe entity lag or something like that might cause these dispensers firing arrows to cause a little bit of a problem here, which maybe I should curb later by collecting the arrows and dumping them out into lava so that they safely get despawned that way. But arrows will still despawn after a few minutes, and it's kind of funny to have them just fired out indiscriminately. It's certainly not going to block any of the items from leaving the dispensers, and hopefully that should all be fine. So each of these dropper clocks is a little bit of a different design from the usual one. Just had to loop the comparator signal back around to this block here and make sure it was looping back around into the comparator itself. I don't think that locks the hopper behind it at any point. Hopefully it doesn't, and if it does, it's very brief. I still don't have a roof on this thing right now. What you're seeing is mobs that have spawned on the empty platforms where the water hasn't activated. I still need to go in and make sure that the timer circuit is all set up, but each of these water streams now directs the drops into this line here, which the honey blocks align the items along the side of these hoppers, making sure they'll be able to make it all the way to the end without getting caught in the hopper's hitboxes. And I do still need to decide exactly what is going in each of these filters, but right now, yep, there we go. I think we saw some rotten flesh coming through the system. Perfect example. It just ended up going along the edge of the hopper and then into the hopper right here. And once we fill these up with filler items, and I probably want to have 2 for the gunpowder, 2 for the bones, 2 for the rotten flesh, and string, and everything else can go in these last 3, with everything that doesn't get filtered just ending up in the last set of chests. And since our killing mechanism here is based on fire, I do not believe witches will give us all that many drops, because witches will typically drink a potion of fire resistance and then just stand there not taking any damage. So chances are we're just going to handle it by having them despawn in much the same way as mobs will despawn if you end up outside of a 32 block range of them. They should despawn pretty easily, and we're going to be standing at least 32 blocks away from where the killing mechanisms in the fire are. They're not going to despawn instantly, but they will despawn occasionally, allowing more mobs to spawn in the farm and making sure we don't get the entire system gummed up with witches. But these Soul Fire Campfires are going to be the MVP of this particular system. I think they're going to be a really good addition to this farm, and if we want to cover up the water streams here with a little bit of extra glass, I have some in my inventory, but I think we're probably just going to put a roof on this thing, sort out the timing for all of the dispensers, and then let's see how well this thing runs. Oh, that took a lot of work. That took a lot of work. There was a lot of slabs. That's probably about a full double chest plus a little extra of the slabs, but look at this thing crank out mobs. This is so cool. I've never built one with this much spawning capacity before, and it looks like it is going to pay dividends. Let's hop down into this little area, and you can see all of the drops are coming in. Everything is gliding through the system as planned. I will just pillar up here just to make sure that there aren't any kind of blockages anywhere. Look at, in the water stream, you can see where the dispenser has been firing out arrows, but that is not obstructing the items in any way. The arrows should despawn as planned, meaning 1 fewer thing to store in the chest here. And look at the gunpowder roll in. This has just happened while I've been building the roof. We already have 6 stacks of gunpowder, and we're getting a little bit more. And any excess is going to go into this system of chests here. We already have a bunch of bones as well. Bones will go into that one too. We got 2 chests for rotten flesh, 1 for string, 1 for whatever else happens to roll on through here. I don't think I've assigned this one yet, have I? Well, that one seems to have accepted string as well. The filter fish are doing their job, though. I reckon 2 for string, and then 1 last one for anything else that makes its way through the system. Hopefully, that should all be good. And I can leave this thing on for a few hours while it runs, and maybe while I get some sleep or edit this video, one or the other. And while we're up here, I may as well show you the mechanism. This is your standard Etho hopper clock with about 32 items in one of the hoppers, shuttling back and forth in there with an observer detecting when that changes. And every time it does that, it sends a signal out to each of these 4 note blocks, which is being detected by the observer, and that is what sends the signal down the chain of dispensers. The topmost spawning platform in this thing is at about Y206, so add 24 to that to make sure we are in range. We need to be roughly at Y230 for all of these spawning pads to start spawning stuff. Of course, that is in a spherical radius around the player, so realistically we only need to be maybe about 20 blocks up for basically all of the spawnable space in here to be basically spawnable, for us to be far enough away that mobs are going to spawn there. So I think I'll just add a little bit of scaffolding to the top of this observer here, which I've lit up because otherwise some stuff can spawn on the very few solid blocks that we still have up here. The redstone block and the observer could potentially spawn some stuff. I'm going to scaffold up, we're going to leave this thing on for a little while, and we'll see how many drops we end up with at the end of that. Okay, folks, morning. The moment of truth is here. I've left this thing on for about, I would say, 6 hours total, and it's time to see how many drops we have in the sorting system. I'm very excited to see this. It looks like it has been working just fine overnight. Haven't noticed any issues with it. Left the world logged in, and yep, that's looking pretty solid. That is, okay, that's the first 4 chests in the slice all filled up with gunpowder. That is TNT by the bucket load. Very nice. Even a little bit of the gunpowder has made it into the next chest over. We, I assume, would have the same amount of bones. Just about, yes. Same amount of bones there. A few in the next chest over as well. Lots and lots of rotten flesh. No surprises there. A lot of zombies cranking out of this machine. Once again, we have an extra chest filling up there. All the string I could ever ask for. If we wanted to turn this into wool to make beds, to blow up more stuff in the nether, we could do that, of course. And this final chest does not have anything in at all, which is a good thing, because this one is completely unfiltered, which means that anything that made its way through the rest of the system would end up there. And it looks like what we have here is a nice, solid overflow chest with no arrows to worry about and probably no witch drops coming into the system either. It looks like everything is running as expected, which is absolutely perfect. The whole purpose of this really being to get as much gunpowder and as many bones as possible, and to show how effective it can be using Soul Fire Campfires in these mechanisms now, because they really are killing the mobs pretty quickly as far as I can see. I mean, you've just got to look at the amount of mobs that are making their way down here now, and oh, the skeletons are really trying to have a crack at me, it seems like, but there is a cauldron of mobs in there now which are slowly taking damage, and they all die pretty quickly. Faster than they should with magma blocks, faster than they should with regular campfires. I think that's all going incredibly well. Get down there, spider. I think he's just tracking towards me, and therefore takes a little bit longer to get in there. But yes, we have ourselves a really powerful mob spawner now. And I think the amount of drops we can get for just a few hours AFK really speaks for itself. I'm going to have a super fun time crafting all of this into TNT later, probably going out and harvesting some sand from a desert, and then, my friends, then we can really get to searching for ancient debris with some TNT on our side. But that is where we are going to leave it for this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. I do hope you enjoyed this look at Soulfire and a brand new mob spawner design. Don't forget to leave a like on this episode if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.